Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we're going to be doing my 14.11 supports tier list. So if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch. We saw some champions indirectly get nerfed in support through other roles being too strong, the likes of Hui, Camille within this space. Pantheon received some changes for top lane primarily, which helped him within the support role. And on top of this, we saw 2 enchanter buffs to both Nami and Lulu. So let's cover the changes. To begin with, the D tier has a couple of champions in it. Twitch and MF have been underperforming for a while. This is no surprise to anyone. Both these champions practically pushed out of the support role at this point. Their builds tend to be pretty obnoxious when strong, especially in MF's case, so she's intentionally left weak, even though she is slightly more popular than Twitch. Twitch's popularity has almost completely faded at this point. He is not performing very well in the support role. The nerfs to his AP ratios continuously over time. His itemization's gotten weaker. Halo Blade's got nerfed for ranged champions. There are just a lot of things which progressively have caused more problems for Twitch. So he sits within the D tier, the bottom of the D tier at this point. Yumi has been underperforming for a while. She's getting buffed in 14.12. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The champion is very limited in the amount of pairing she has within the ADC role. Doesn't quite align with her popularity, as she tends to be played as a pairing with quite a few things. As she has a pretty good pairing with the likes of Lucian and Tristana, which provide her with some ability, which she otherwise doesn't get with some of the other picks. Zeri is the more standard combination with Yumi, but the pick underperforms. It still struggles. It is getting buffed, but for the most part, don't play it at the moment. It's within the D tier. Malphite is a bit of a niche option. Tends to just be played as like a pairing with Yasuo in the bot lane. You value the ultimate, and yeah, you just go with that. You hope that you can burst the opponent down. If you can't, you lose the game. If you can, then you can honestly have a good time playing this pick. It's not as egregious as some of the other ones here, like his Q is good harass and laning phase, albeit pretty expensive as a mana cost. He doesn't really have any extended trading patterns though, like early on into the game, especially if you are going like the AP variant. You will just get pushed over by some of the other hook champions here, so they tend to be a bit more built up and a bit able to rotate more combinations of abilities early on into the game, which can force Malphite out of lane. The likes of Nautilus, Fresh even, auto weaving with their W or Fresh's E in this case. Malphite sits within the D tier. Veigar and Hui is going to be moved down from the C tier into the D tier now. Hui got nerfed this patch, and Veigar has just been underperforming in the support role for a while. He tends to just be paired with the likes of Zig, so you can get the W cage bounce, and then kind of set up combos from there. But I'd recommend running the likes of Veigar as an APC option. He tends to be relatively strong there, and he's a decent mid laner, so you can kind of flex between both. In Hui's case, decent bot laner, but very unpopular at this point. Tends to be really good within the mid lane and higher elo. Of course, the nerfs have brought him down a bit, but now he's kind of sat within the D tier as well for the support role. The other champion here is Ashe. Obviously, Ashe is an incredibly elite skewed pick. You only really see this pairing with the likes of Varus. Halo Blades got nerfed at the beginning of 14.10 for ranged champions to kind of push away from this obnoxious Double Halo Blades lane bully marksman meta, which we were seeing within pro play, where you'd end up forcing the enemy into lane swapping. Ashe is really suffering from that. Has been really weak even before that as a support option within solo queue. I would recommend avoiding this pick, especially with mid and low elo. Can operate a bit better higher up, but yeah, Ashe sits within the D tier for the moment. Moving on to the C tier, we have a couple of champions here. So we have Karma, who is getting buffed in 14.12. She's still massively underperforming in the support role. She has received continuous buffs, and this 14.12 change should be the one to really push her up. I wouldn't be surprised if she lands within the A or the S tier. Swain, they've spoken about this. They want to do a kit reshape for him, or a mini rework. His current play, he doesn't really feel suited for any role. He doesn't feel supported in any of the 4 roles which he can kind of be played in. He tends to operate best as a bot laner, but then bot laners don't tend to want to play Swain. Mid lane tends to feel a bit punishing at points, but can be really strong in certain situations. Support is probably his weakest role and where most of his core audience is at the moment. just puts him in a bad spot. He's currently within the C tier. Senna, I'm going to drop down from the B tier to the C tier. Senna has been underperforming for a while. The current support meta, or popularity of loads of hook champs, it's really bad for her. She really suffers into like your Blitzcranks, your Nautiluses, your Thrashes, your Pikes, stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of these champions are like the popular ones within the game at the moment, and Senna really struggles. Combined with like some of the other supports being buffed, she has now dropped from the B tier to the C tier. Moving on to the B tier, we have Pantheon. He has gotten a bit better within the support role. He is now able to He's stronger off less items. Like, you're not so reliant on continuously snowballing as you once were. The W has a bit more power in it as like a baseline. Like when you put points into visibility, obviously. Well, even just 1 point, it can be quite nice. Obviously, the Unwanted Magic was more reliant on burst. The E now gives you a bit more durability. Helps, especially when you are playing the likes of support. And he's doing a bit better off of it. Pantheon, a solid B tier option. Morgana, also within my B tier. She has relatively good pairings. Obviously, you want to have her in situations where you can get a lot of setup going and kind of continuously snare someone down. Less tenacity in the game has definitely helped her. Obviously, there are still the likes of Mercs, and if you overcap on magic damage within your team, then you'll begin to see a lot of people going Mercs. The pick's not bad, obviously it has decent pairings, but it kind of sits within the B tier. There are better damage options and a bit better carry options if you're looking for something down that route, but Morgana has access to a bit more utility. Pyke is going to be my B tier. He got nerfed towards the end of, well, I mean, I believe he got nerfed in 14.9. He lost a bit of power there, but generalistically this champion tends to be a bit more elite skewed anyway. If you can land your hooks, snowball throughout the game, then you can be really strong, but don't tend to see that as much with mid elo. So he sits within the back of my B tier. Neeko is getting closer to the C tier. Honestly, her power within the support role and just generalistically within mid lane as well has kind of been dwindling. She was really strong for a period of time. They kind of tapped her down a bit. Obviously, her oppressiveness in pro play, where they can really make use of like the transform, some of the mechanics like being able to extend your clone by like dancing with it, like to control vision, tends to be a pretty elite skewed mechanic. You don't really see that in average play. Her oppressiveness, like early on into the game, also attributes to this. Tends to be a bit high elo, a bit more pro skewed. Doesn't really scale that well. Tends to be reliant on like Q harass and like being able to land long range snares for your power early on into the game. She kind of just sits at the back of the B tier at this point. Bard also underperforming. Another one, kind of like Neeko, Bard are probably the biggest contenders for dropping down to the C tier. He's just been underperforming ever since his changes back in 14.7, I believe they were, where they tried to push him more towards tankier variants. Well, they wanted him to have like different options, but not be able to go like tanky variants and then one tap people as well, which is what he was doing at the time. Obviously, we've seen nerfs towards Bloodsong. We saw nerfs to some of his itemization. It's hurt him, it's tagged him down. He now sits towards the back of the B tier. They probably want to leave him here for the moment though, as he tends to be pretty elite skewed alongside some of the other picks within the support tier list. Moving on, we have Camille. She got nerfed this patch, obviously for top lane. She was overperforming there. Now that she's re-established as a good top laner, they are fine with nerfing her. She lost a bit of damage on her ultimate. She lost a bit of movement speed on the Q. These two things don't really affect support as much, so she stays pretty neutral. But she has lost a bit of power, so she now goes from like mid B tier to like sitting towards the back end of the B tier. Amumu, very easy champion to play. Honestly, his simplicity gives him a lot of power. Like if this was directed towards high elo, he'd probably be close to C or D tier, as it's very telegraphed on what this champion wants to do. And if you can kind of play around it, then he loses most of his power. But yeah, Amumu in his current state, really good champion. I'd really recommend him, especially within the jungle. Maybe not so much for support one, but he is accessible as a flex pick here. If you feel like you're proficient at Amumu, not that this champion has a particularly high skill ceiling, then go ahead. You can play him in the support role. There are build variations. You primarily do just go end up going like your Lockett. You can go like your Zeeks, your Knights, stuff like that. And he's a solid B2 option. Renata has been more powerful in the past. It's kind of like a mid or a high B tier option at this point. She's fine within the current meta. She has decent pairings. Obviously, you want to be able to utilize her passive a lot, especially when taking objectives. That is where a lot of her power kind of lies. But on top of this, her E shielding within laning phase can be quite oppressive, especially against champions which can't really break shield without and like overforcing, and then like you can punish them utilizing your Q, the W chase with like a Cogmore or a Jinx or something like that. And then her R is one of the greatest team fighting ultimates in the game. If you get the setup for it, you can completely turn fights with it. Can be really powerful. Renata, a very solid B tier option. Teemo, incredibly low elo skewed. This pick will massively decline the higher rank you go, to the point where I wouldn't really recommend Teemo as a pick, but he is fine. Like, he is a solid support option, especially lower down. His scaling is incredible. Obviously, being able to control like zones with shrooms, just having that freedom of not needing to farm waves and kind of roam about and get that control down can be quite powerful. Very solid B tier option. Like, you should have decent success playing this pick within like Emerald to maybe even Diamond, and then yeah, he will begin to fall off after that point. Alistar, still a solid option. Good engage and like good setup, obviously reliant on his pairings. That tends to be where a lot of his power lies. You want your like Samiras, your Tristanas, and yeah, he should be decent within that. But Alistar tends to be a bit on the weaker side compared to some of the other options, as when he is strong, he does end up being quite oppressive within pro play. But Alistar, still a solid B tier option. The changes towards his passive have definitely helped him, allow him to feel a bit better to lane with. Galio, really strong mid laner, one of the strongest mid laners in the game at the moment. Within support, he's also like decent here. Like, he's definitely being helped with some of his build variations, being a bit more durable. If you're picking up the likes of some health items, it's really nice for him. You primarily go like a tanky AP hybrid. You value items like Shredia, does help you like chase with W, helps your teammates out, allows you to roam a bit more effectively. And Galio, very solid B tier option. Moving on to the A tier, so we have Lulu. Lulu is a lot better after her buffs. It pushed her from like the back end of the B tier to like a solid A tier option. Obviously, she was a big loser of Soradia's being nerfed, but a lot of people should be going Ardent on this champion. It's really powerful, especially if you get good synergies with that item. Obviously, if you don't have the synergies, then I wouldn't really recommend it. Lulu tends to be pretty bound to like heavy auto attack based champions. You don't want to pair the likes of Lulu with an AP bot laner. It just doesn't really work. Like, Lulu Carthus sounds egregious to the point where, yeah, it's not worth playing. So yeah, make sure you know what your ADC is playing, and then Lulu should be pretty effective, especially if you have the likes of like a Kog'Maw. Shen and Tom Kench once again next to each other. Both these champions reliant on Heart still within the support role to kind of like be useful within solo queue. You don't really need it within elite and competitive. Obviously, you don't get that level of income traditionally, but especially within mid elo and low elo, you want a bit more agency. I really would recommend foregoing like playing a full support in a champion, as you're like relying on your teammates to like actually have hands. Oftentimes not a gamble, which I would really recommend. But yeah, Shen, Tom Kench, recommend going Hearthstone when you're playing these champion support. Have a bit more agency, try and snowball your advantages where you can, and yeah, you should find decent success on these picks. Maokai, very easy support to play. Great solid engage option. Obviously, E gives him a lot of vision control, can be quite powerful. His ult has great setup. I'm not as much of a fan of Maokai. Like, I wouldn't really recommend Maokai as a champion, as he does have some shortcomings, but like his map traversal, his E control with vision, his R can all be very powerful tools. And yeah, they definitely do have some merits to them. So yeah, Maokai, solid A tier option. Vel'Koz has been decent for a while now, especially with mid lane. I'd really recommend people look into this champion if they do enjoy playing Vel'Koz. Obviously, he received some base damage buffs back in like early last split, I believe, which did help him out. There were like some Shredia variations, some mandate versions. I believe the current way to go is like full AP versions. I could be wrong on that, but like yeah, do the research for him. I know Vel'Koz is definitely in a better spot at the moment, and definitely considerable when playing. Seraphine, also actually in a really good spot at the moment. Like, Seraphine support has been something I've hated for a long time. This pick has been really underpowered where her core audience is. Now Seraphine support in a really good spot. I would actually recommend playing this champion if you do enjoy it. Her E and her R are very valuable snaring tools. Her damage is fine. Her supportive capabilities is really good. Her synergy with Echoes of Helia. I wouldn't recommend defaulting on First Strike every game. That is a solid option. Obviously, it is being nerfed in 14.12. You'll go back to running Airy in most games. But Seraphine, in a solid spot, a great A tier pick. Lux, also within the A tier, a solid burst mage. If you want a bit more agency and you want something with burst, Lux is the most popular support in the game. probably supports one of the highest ban rates in the support role in general play. I haven't looked it up, but I mean, I can look it up actually. Let's just quickly have a look at this. Lux currently supports a 15% ban rate. It's relatively high, but you should get Lux a decent amount unless like an enemy team does end up picking it away. Yeah, Pick's really popular, but her burst, her synergies can be quite powerful. She's a solid A tier option. Rakan, traditionally like an S tier pick, but for the moment he kind of sits within the A tier. Xayah was a bit better, then I imagine his win rate would probably go up and he would feel a bit stronger to play, as that tends to be one of his more common pairings, but he can still function quite nicely with other options. I know Twitch Rakan used to be something pretty popular. Still probably a solid option. Obviously, current ADCs, which are really strong at the moment, like of the likes of Ashe, which tend to be a bit more bound to some of the enchant options. But I imagine Rakan Ashe should find a decent amount of success. Shaco, actually a really good support option. I would really recommend learning AP Shaco if you want good control. Shaco is probably the better version of Teemo for the most part. If like boxes are really hard to play against into like when you're playing heavy melee teams. If an enemy team consists of lots of range, they can break your boxes from distance. It's not as worth to play this pick. But if you can get the right angles to play Shaco, like if the champions are forced to walk into boxes to disarm them, then you should have a whale of a time. This champion can be really strong and makes it really hard to approach the likes of Drakes and Rift Heralds. Yeah, you should find decent success. Shaco, solid A tier option. Thresh and Nautilus are still really solid picks. Both of these should be going Slay where they can. That item is really good. I believe Bloodsong is actually a solid option on Nautilus. Over the likes of Celestial Opposition, but then like your Lockets, your Knights, stuff like that are really strong at the moment. Gives you great supportive capabilities. Obviously, their oppressiveness in lane. If you can land a hook, then oftentimes that can convert into a lot of damage, banning some of the spells, and possibly even a kill. Both these champions in a solid spot. Nautilus tends to be a bit more bait. Like you shouldn't play Nautilus every game. There are answers to Nautilus. He isn't unstoppable. Thresh is a bit better, a bit harder to play though. Yeah, both of these are solid A tier options. Zilean, we're back to like the tank variations, like your Guardian, your Warmog, stuff like that. And then you just get like durability route, running maybe things like your Knight's Vow, and then kind of being a bit more supportive in that space rather than like outputting a huge amount of damage with Q. You'd like max your E, you max your W, and yeah, you just rotate slows, rotate speed ups, be really obnoxious within games, and he's relatively successful, a solid A tier option. Milio, a great enchanter, really synergistic with a lot of champions. I believe Echoes of Helio is actually pretty good on this pick. That combined with like your Ardent Sensor, Chevalier is like a later item on him, can all be pretty good. Milio, very solid A tier pick, tends to be pretty synergistic with the likes of Lucian, where you can rotate your W with his passive quite a significant amount. Soraka, also a really good champion, great amounts of heals, can be really oppressive to play against in the right situations. Has a really strong pairing with Ashe at the moment. Ashe, of course, being a really strong marksman, something I would really recommend playing. Obviously getting nerfed in 14.12, but yeah, Soraka, really solid A tier pick. Zac, great for his engage, tends to be pretty hard to move out of the support role. Yeah, a lot of his power does come from his engaging, his like setup, his why can't I find the word? His displacement during team fights. There we go, I found it. Yeah, Zac, really solid tank option within the support role. Hard to move. Has a lot of power with his passive. Great A tier pick. Moving on to the S tier, we have Taric. Taric is really unpopular, like the most unpopular, like pure support within the game. This pick is still relatively strong though. Like there is definitely a lot of power to Taric. If you can like drop your ultimates at the right time, you can make it ADC significantly tankier. When you're running like your Knights, you have W on them, giving them a solid amount of armor and shielding. There are decent items, obviously. Fimbulwinter tends to be pretty cool on this champion, and then you can go like tank variations. You can even sometimes poach like your enchanter options, your redemption, stuff like that. Taric, a very solid S tier pick. I'd really recommend finding the correct pairings for this champion, and you should have a decent amount of success. Blitzcrank, I mean, we've heard it now. Blitzcrank is incredibly popular within China at the moment. Within the West and the some of the other regions, it's not as prevalent. Obviously, it got nerfed in 14.10. They are nerfing it again in 14.11, only going after the base health, and then reverting the shield change they made back in 14.9 or 10, I believe. Yeah, Blitzcrank, still a really strong champion, a great hook option. One hook can like force summoners, spells burn, and can even convert into kills. So yeah, good, really solid champion, especially into multiple squishy targets where it can be really hard to play against this pick. Xerath, once again, your go-to burst mage within the bot lane. This champion is really good at the moment. I'd really recommend playing it. It's both good in the mid lane, it's both good in the support, it's also good in the support role. Yeah, lots of carry potential of this pick if you're looking for something a bit more oppressive in laning phase, which is a lot of burst. Xerath is my recommended go-to. If you want a bit more burn, Brand and Zarya both these champions are relatively simple to play. Both have a lot of dot accessibility and can be really oppressive in that nature. Obviously, Blackfire Torch isn't always a go-to on these picks. I'd honestly recommend like Leandries and Rylai's in a lot of situations. They don't tend to run into as many mana problems, and Blackfire tends to be... It's good for mana-hungry champions. If you're not really expending, like you're not really going for your mana a huge amount, then yeah, you don't really need it a huge amount. So Leandry, Rylai tends to be really solid core options on these two picks. But they're really good at the moment, so yeah, I'd really recommend them. In case you want a bit more durability, then Braum and Leona are really solid safety nets. Leona, her incredible amounts of lockdown are really valuable at the moment, whereas more, like the least amount of tenacity accessible within the game at the moment. Mercs tend to be... pretty top lane jungle skewed. Like you don't see other roles outside of these two buying Mercs. If you can like continuously lock down an ADC who isn't running cleanse, obviously higher up you go, cleanse is going to be taken a lot more into Leona. In Braum's case, he's a great answer to a lot of picks at the moment. A lot of heavy engage he will be really strong against. In cases where, like, they're blinding enchanters, I wouldn't really recommend Braum. I wouldn't really recommend him just as a blind option, because if you do get counterpicked by an enchanter, you are going to struggle a lot more within the game. But these two picks are very deserving of S-tier spots. If you want something with a bit more engaged, Rel is a great pick here as well. She tends to be one of the best go-to elite picks with it, or elite skewed supports within the game at the moment. But she's really strong within mid and low elo. Of course, Slay tends to be the go-to support item. And then you can go, like, with the likes of your Locket, your Knights, your Z. And yeah, she finds a lot. She has a lot of success. A great S-tier option. And then we have 3 enchanter picks here. So Nami got buffed this patch. She is in a great spot at the moment. Of course, her pairings with Brand and Lucian are practically unparalleled. These two pairs are really strong for her. Being able to rotate Lucian's passive, being able to just reapply E on Brand's burn targets, combining with like her CC and her W can be really oppressive. And yeah, she's in a really solid spot at the moment, a great S-tier option. If you want something with a bit more AoE healing, then Sona is definitely a good pick for you. This champion is finding a lot of success. Kind of goes under the radar though. Obviously, a lot of people hate Sona to see this champion. We're like, oh, it's just an instant news. But the pick's really strong. Obviously, you can get punished by hook champions early on into the game. And oftentimes, if you do get hooked, you will die. You're a very squishy target. But later on into the game, if you're able to like stay ahead of the curve and not fall egregiously far behind, then Sona can just be a really solid win con. It's really hard to move this champion later on, especially with the lack of solid assassin options almost at the moment. Of course, there are other picks, but yeah, Sona really solid S-tier pick. Janna also really good here. Obviously, Janna has been like top of the support meta for a while. They do kind of like leaving her here. Her W max tends to be pretty oppressive to play against. Obviously, they compensated nerfing W by buffing up the E max, so that also does have a decent amount of power. Her shielding, her poke can be really oppressive to play against. So it's also really hard to approach this champion. Her Q and R give her a lot of safety net, which yeah, can really benefit marksman. So really solid S to pick. And then Poppy. Poppy is my S+ option. She has incredible amounts of power within the support role at the moment. Obviously, Bloodsong combined with the likes of Halo Blades gives her like assassin level burst potential. She's really durable. Her anti-mobility on her W is really oppressive to play against. Her map mobility, when you're going items like Deadman, Swifties, or Symbiotic Souls, I know that item's actually not bad. It just tends to be relatively unpopular. And then you can go like the route of like more damage or more durability. Poppy in a great spot at the moment. Definitely my recommended go-to S+ pick. She should be used as a counter pick, but she is generalistically really good at the moment. So she actually breaks the norm, sits in the S+ tier. And yeah, those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.